The introduction of nuclear weapons shaped the face of the world as we know it. Humans finally figured out a way to annihilate their own kind with just a press of a button that will launch weapons of mass destruction which will alter the lives of those affected forever.
The Manhattan Project was the most top-secret mission the U.S. had developed at that point in time. They brought in some of the world's best and brightest minds to create a weapon so powerful it would strike fear into any living soul. In 1945, the U.S. used the world's first atomic bomb to end World War II. However, the creation of this bomb started a frenzy within the world that sparked the Cold War and the race to develop more weapons like it.
The U.S. needed a place where they could test the weapons that they had developed, and they did not want to do so in their own backyard, which is when they looked to the Marshall Islands, islands that were isolated from major landforms. The islands filled with people who built their society on kindness and compassion. These people had no idea what the effects of these nuclear weapons would have on their beloved islands. The U.S. convinced the Marshallese that it was God's will that they let the U.S. test their weapons on their islands, and the Marshallese, being the spiritual people that they are, agreed to leave their islands because if it was God's will, then it must be done. They had no idea that they would probably never be able to return to the island of their ancestors or safely consume the food the island provided. Their lives and the lives who came after them would be changed forever. After the people of Bikini Atoll and Eniwetok were moved to a location that they believed to be safe, the U.S. began testing their nuclear weapons. They detonated their first bomb on July 1st, 1946, and then detonated another and another and another, totaling 67 nuclear tests between the two islands. The U.S. may have ended their testing on the islands, but that does not mean that you cannot see the scars that they left behind. In Eniwetok, the U.S. decided that they are going to use one of the smaller craters created by the bombs as a nuclear waste dumping ground. They brought in about 4,000 U.S. soldiers who were not given any protective gear nor told about the detrimental side effects radiation can have on the body, to build a concrete dome and put the nuclear waste into it. The dome was not lined on the bottom, which means that the sea washes in, it gets into the dome, and then when it washes out, it brings the radioactive waste back into the ocean. Also, the rising sea levels increases the risk of the water crashing into the dome. This means that there is a good chance that the dome will crack under pressure and completely release all of the radioactive material into the ocean, causing even more environmental problems than it already has. This means that now not only do the Marshallese have a giant concrete dome on their island that they cannot return to, but the marine life that they rely so heavily on also contains radiation. The blasts from the bomb themselves can also cause major damage to the coral reefs that house so many life forms, again lowering the food supply for the Marshallese. Not only is the environment itself feeling the side effects of the nuclear weapons, but the people themselves are also feeling them. The U.S. did not tell the Marshallese people, but they are basically part of an experiment to see how the bomb affects the people within the proximity of the blasts. The side effects were gruesome. They caused painful burns, skin discoloration, sores, and so on. However, most of the major health problems caused were internal. Cancer rates within the community skyrocketed, but it didn't stop there. These problems are passed down from generation to generation. Babies that looked like jellyfish were being born. Babies with deformities and other complications were also being born and are still being born today. The U.S. government promised that they would pay those who were affected by the bombs, but have yet to completely follow through with those promises. Also, even though the U.S. occupied the islands and colonized them for nuclear purposes, they refused to recognize the Marshallese people as U.S. citizens. This means that all the people who live with fatal health problems do not have access to health care, which would aid in decreasing the likelihood of death. The U.S. government downplayed the health problems caused and stated that the health hazards are insignificant, refusing to help the Marshallese who developed health problems that their nuclear weapons caused. The lives of the Marshallese people were changed forever after the first detonation of the bomb in 1946. It was a chain reaction that would cause physical, mental, and spiritual pain for the Marshallese people. The world as they knew it would be no more, as they could never return to their old ways. Pieces of their culture were altered every single time one of those bombs would go off. First, by being essentially permanently removed from their islands, already distances them from their ancestors, the ones who created and shaped the culture as they know it. Also, moving islands meant that sailing navigation was needed less in the open waters. There were no islands north of the two islands, so the people of Bikini especially were exceptional open water navigators. But now that they are surrounded by other islands, they did not need to finely tune those skills as much. The Marshallese were stripped of their homeland, and that will weigh on the heart of anyone. Secondly, the defacing of their environment changed the way they had to go about their days. Similarly, it also is the reason why they could not return back to their original islands, because the U.S. deemed them to be uninhabitable. The U.S. deemed the lives unlivable, and they also decided to put the giant dome on Eniwetok, a dome that the Marshallese people see as a giant tomb, something that symbolizes the graveyard that these weapons turned their island into, a graveyard that contains organisms that are still radioactive today. Meaning that the Marshallese cannot simply continue their hunting and gathering as before, but have to develop different mechanisms or be pickier about where their food is coming from. There's also the risk of eating something that is still contaminated by radiation. The people themselves are also affected by the radiation. It causes death at early ages, which can alter the amount of knowledge and practices passed down, as children die at early ages or adults die or may be too weak to pass down their knowledge. Not only that, but it also takes a major toll on the mothers of the community, as they risk giving birth to deformed babies, ones that they cannot even hold in their arms, which will break anyone's spirit. However, somehow, even after all these painful circumstances, the Marshallese people refused to just sit quietly and live out the rest of their days. Their culture may be taking hits, but they are not willing to let all of it fizzle out. They are finding new ways to gain information and continue their lives as they once knew. Not only that, but they are demanding to be heard. They are demanding for the rights that they should have never been stripped of. All the Marshallese want is to live in peace where they can continue spreading joy and kindness to everyone, and they will not stop until they are able to live their lives this way again.